She threaded the needle by feel. The lamp had burned low an hour ago, and she did not light another. Light meant sound. Sound meant questions. She had no more answers left to give. The linen lay open across her knees, white, undyed, the kind used for the dead when there was no money for better cloth. There was money. She had chosen this piece herself 3 months ago when her daughter's cough turned wet. In her left hand, she held a single sheet of papyrus, folded 3 times. The creases had gone soft. She pressed it flat against the linen. Then she began to sew. The needle was bone. The thread was wool dyed red, the same red she used to mark the margins of her texts. The small corrections no one acknowledged were hers. The thread made no sound. She counted each stitch the way she used to count words. 7 stitches, 8. In the next room, her daughter had stopped breathing. Miriam had checked once. She did not check again. Her husband slept. He was good at that, sleeping through things that required witnesses. 9 stitches, 10. The papyrus was the last page she had managed to keep. When the council came for the scrolls, she had pressed this sheet between her palms inside her robe and stood still while they searched the room. They had not searched her. Women were furniture. Furniture did not hide things. 11, 12. She finished and bit the thread clean. She smoothed the linen over the papyrus. You could not feel it from the outside. You could not see it. The only way to find it was to know it was there. She folded the linen, set it by the door. When her husband called, "Is the body prepared?" she said yes. That was the only word she spoke. Her name was Miriam. She lived east of the Jordan in the 2nd century before the Common Era, in the years when the texts of Enoch moved between hands, disputed and taken. She was a scribe's daughter and a scribe's wife. She learned her father's trade in the hours he allowed her beside him when no one watched. She was better at it than he was. He knew this. He never said it aloud. When she married, she brought her skills like a water jar, useful, carried by her, owned by the household she entered. Her husband, Asher, was a competent copyist. He reproduced a text with precision, but he could not think inside a text. He could not hear the wrong word the way you hear a stone in a sandal. Miriam could, so the work divided itself. Asher copied, Miriam corrected. Asher presented the scrolls to the council. Miriam prepared the next section. Only one name appeared in the colophon. She had understood the arrangement. She told herself it was practical, that invisible work was still work, that the words were still hers, whether or not the clay bore her name. Silence kept her family fed. Silence kept her husband respected. Silence, she believed, was the only survival for a woman who knew more than men were prepared to forgive. She was wrong, but she would not know it for 40 years. The text, called the Book of the Watchers, had passed through 7 pairs of hands before it reached Asher. By the time Miriam sat with the scrolls, the text was a living argument, full of voices about angels and judgment. She read it in one sitting. Her husband had not read it at all. He was waiting for her summary. She gave him a summary. She also began to rebuild the text from the inside. She found the seams, traced the older layer beneath. Over 6 months, working before dawn, she reconstructed the original argument. Then she wrote something new, not a copy, a contribution, 11 lines. They described the women the Watchers had taken, not as victims, but as women handed knowledge they never asked for and did not know how to survive. Women who had learned things that changed them in ways men could not understand and therefore called corruption. She did not tell Asher. She copied them into the scroll in the hour before the council arrived. Her hand did not shake. She had inherited her father's steadiness. When the council read the text, a man named Eleazar paused at those 11 lines. He read them again. He looked at Asher. Asher nodded. Eleazar looked at the scroll. Then he looked at Miriam, who served water near the wall. He held the look for 3 seconds. Then he looked back at Asher and said, "This section is strong." Miriam set down the water jar, walked out. She stood in the courtyard until her jaw unclenched. She knew what was coming. The council formalized the colophon 6 months later. Asher told her the night before. "They will include my name," he said. "It is better this way. You understand." She said she understood. She understood that Asher had no framework for a woman's name on a sacred text. He was not a cruel man. He provided. He was sometimes kind. She also understood that understanding why something happens does not make it less true. The next morning she sat in the storage room and did not write. She looked at the mud brick wall. It needed replastering. She noted this the way you note a fact that has nothing to do with you. Then she rolled up the secondary scroll, the one containing her corrections, and began to think. A single page could survive differently than a scroll. She thought about this for 3 weeks. While she managed the household and served council meals, she thought. She thought about it when her daughter, Leah, brought her a cup of water and touched her hand. Leah, at 14, already knew that some of her mother's silences were not to be interrupted. Leah understood her mother like a landscape. She did not know about the texts. She only knew her mother had a stillness that was not peace. Miriam looked at her daughter and thought she would carry it without knowing. She felt no guilt. The page would go with Leah into the ground. In 10 years or 100, they would find it, or they would not. She could not control that. What she could control was the act itself, the placing, the sewing, the red thread. Leah died in the autumn. The cough had settled in her chest 2 winters before and never left. The last 3 months they talked every afternoon about the smell of cedar oil, a neighbor's goat, a song Leah liked as a child. They did not talk about dying. The afternoon before she died, Leah reached over and pressed her mother's hand 3 times, firm and deliberate. Then she let go. Miriam sat with her until her hand went cold. Then she went to the storage room and found the page, the linen, and the red thread. She worked in the dark, 9 stitches. The thread was silent. Each stitch was the same distance from the last. When she finished, she bit the thread clean and pressed the linen flat with both palms. She felt nothing on the outside, no ridge, no seam. The page had disappeared into the cloth, the way her name had disappeared into the text, exactly the way. Asher died 19 years later. He died honored. His name was in 4 colophons, and the council had given him a stone marker. Miriam stood in the back of the room and watched men say true things about a man who had also done one thing they did not know. She outlived him by 16 years. She corrected texts when her son brought them to her, often because he had inherited her eye. He said so in private. She did not ask him to say it in public. The act was complete. The man who found it was 22 years old, sent to prepare Leah's tomb. He worked alone. When he lifted the burial cloth and found it intact after 40 years, dry stone, good conditions, he set it aside. That evening he felt the stiffness in the linen near the border. He saw the thread, red, neat, 7 stitches and a knot. He cut it open. The papyrus inside was dry. The writing was small and clean. At the top of the page, in the margin, in that same red ink, were 2 words, a woman's name. He brought the page to the council chamber. He read the 2 words aloud. The room went quiet. One man, the eldest, closed his eyes and pressed his hands flat on the table. The text was recopied that year. The new colophon listed 2 names. The correction was small, a few words added to a document that no one outside the copying house would ever read. But the words were there, and the red thread held its color for 3 more centuries. When someone finally asked what kind of dye holds that long, the answer was simple. It was the same dye used in the margin work of that period's most careful scribes, the kind of attention that leaves a record, even when no one was looking, even then.